"Ready," the photographer said. Kendrick turned to his wife. "Not you." He pulled another woman into the frame and kissed her cheek. The room broke into whispers. Every eye went to Aaliyah, waiting for her to react. She didn't. She reached into her clutch, checked her phone, typed something, and slipped it back like nothing had happened. Nobody noticed who she had just texted. The estate was the kind of place that made people stand up straighter the moment they walked through the gate. Wrought iron at the entrance, a long gravel path that crunched under heels, and then the property itself, wide and green and expensive in the way that old money stays quiet about itself. Rented for the afternoon, draped in the kind of effort that takes weeks to organize. White folding chairs arranged in neat rows on a manicured lawn. Round tables covered in ivory linen, each one centered with a small arrangement of white flowers that nobody had asked for, but somehow made the whole thing feel intentional. Catered trays on a long serving table near the house. Children in pressed clothes who had started the afternoon behaving, and were now, 40 minutes in, chasing each other between the legs of adults who told them to slow down without really meaning it. The air smelled like cut grass and warm food, and the particular kind of manufactured occasion that happens when a family decides to look its best, all at the same time. Aaliyah had arrived before the caterers. She was already on the lawn when the first vendor truck came through the gate, and she was the one who told them where to set up. She moved through the early hours of preparation the way she moved through most things. Without needing to be seen doing it, without announcing her decisions, just making them and watching them take shape. She spoke with the photographer before any guest arrived. She walked him to the garden wall on the east side of the property, where the late afternoon light came in flat and warm, and she told him something. He nodded twice and wrote something in his notepad with the particular attentiveness of a man who understands he has been given information that matters. Nobody was watching that exchange. The venue staff were carrying chairs. The catering team was arranging platters. Nobody was paying attention to Aaliyah yet. That was, in many ways, the story of her life in that marriage. Invisible when she was working hardest, noticed only when someone needed something done. She had dressed carefully for the afternoon, a deep burgundy that sat against her skin like it had been chosen by someone who understood color. Her hair pinned at the neck, clean and deliberate. When she clasped her clutch after checking it one final time in the car, she felt the familiar pressure of the folded photograph at the top of the interior pocket. Worn at the edges, soft from years of being moved from bag to bag. She pressed the clutch closed and walked through the gate. By the time the extended family had filled the lawn, grandparents finding shaded seats, cousins catching up near the tables, children forming their own social hierarchies near the garden path, Aaliyah was moving through the crowd with the ease of a woman who had nothing left to fear. She greeted the older aunts by name and asked after their health, and meant it. She made sure the older relatives had chairs with backs on them instead of folding ones. She guided the photographer gently toward the best shooting angles near the garden wall. She was warm and present and composed in the specific way of someone who has been preparing for a long time and has finally arrived at the moment all that preparation was for. Then Kendrick arrived, 40 minutes after the event had started, with Trina on his arm. The shift in the crowd was immediate. Not loud, not performed, just a dropping of the ambient noise by half a register, the way rooms adjust when something arrives that the room is not sure how to accommodate. Conversations continued, but lost their thread for a moment. An older aunt near the drink table reached out and touched her companion's arm without saying why. Two of Kendrick's younger cousins exchanged a look across the lawn. Kendrick walked through all of it like a man who had decided he was owed this. His jacket was pressed. His walk was unhurried. His hand rested at the small of Trina's back with the particular ease of a man announcing something through gesture rather than words. Trina walked beside him with her chin raised and her shoulders back, wearing a deep red dress that she had clearly chosen for this exact audience. When her eyes found Aaliyah across the lawn, she didn't look away. She held the contact. Not long enough to be called a stare. Just long enough to say everything she intended to say without a word of it being provable. Aaliyah met her gaze evenly, then turned back to the conversation she had been having with Kendrick's elderly great-aunt, who was telling a story about a church trip from 1987 that apparently involved a rented bus and a thunderstorm. Aaliyah listened to the end of the story. She laughed at the right moment. She touched the old woman's hand. Kendrick circulated through the crowd without doing much of anything. He accepted drinks and handshakes and the performative ease of a man who has decided the afternoon belongs to him. He did not approach Aaliyah. She did not approach him. The distance between them was visible to everyone and commented on by no one, because there are kinds of distance that the people around them have already processed long before the couple themselves has finished pretending not to. When the photographer called the family to gather for the large portrait, the lawn reorganized itself into the informal order of a family that has taken many photographs together. Grandparents seated at the front, the older generation standing in a row behind them, parents and children fanning out toward the back. Kendrick moved to the center of the group, which was where the husband of the organizing family stood, because Aaliyah had organized this and Kendrick had allowed himself to believe he was the organizing family. Aaliyah stepped in beside him. That was where she belonged. That was where 12 years of marriage placed her, as naturally as breathing. Kendrick turned and looked at her. He put his palm flat against her shoulder and pushed. Not violently. Not the way a scene gets made. Just the flat, patient pressure of a man removing an object from a surface he has decided he owns. Aaliyah's body understood it before her mind could frame a response to it. She took one step sideways, out of the frame. Her clutch stayed in both hands. Her face didn't break. Kendrick lifted 2 fingers and gestured to Trina. Trina moved into the space where Aaliyah had been standing. She settled in beside Kendrick with the careful deliberateness of a woman who had imagined this moment many times. She adjusted the neckline of her red dress. She leaned into Kendrick's arm. When she smiled at the camera, it was the smile of someone claiming something they had decided was already theirs. Kendrick looked out at the assembled guests and said it clearly. "This is the woman I love." A pause. "This is my real family now." The garden went the particular way of spaces where something unspeakable has been said in a public gathering. Not loud, not chaotic. The specific quiet of 60 people collectively deciding not to be the one to respond first. The whispering that followed was not gossip. It was people confirming to each other that they had heard correctly, that the air had indeed changed, that they had not misread the moment. An elderly aunt pressed her fingers to her mouth. A cousin near the back said something to the woman beside her that got swallowed by the sound of a child, somewhere off to the left, asking a question that nobody answered. The children themselves went still. They didn't know the words. They knew the silence. Every eye in the garden moved to Aaliyah. She stood one step outside the photograph, her clutch held in both hands at her waist. Her jaw was level. Her dress didn't move. Her shoulders stayed exactly where they had been. She did not cry. She did not speak. She did not step forward. For 3 full seconds, which is a very long time to be watched by 60 people who are waiting for you to fall apart, she simply stood there. Her eyes moved across the crowd in one slow, deliberate pass, not searching, counting, registering. The way a woman moves her gaze across a room when she already knows every face in it and is simply confirming that the roster she built is assembled and complete. Then she reached into her clutch. She pulled out her phone. She looked at the screen. She pressed the home button and looked again. She typed something. Not hurried, not frantic, each letter placed with the careful patience of someone sending a very short message that does not require revision. She held the phone a moment longer, confirming. Then she slipped it back into the clutch, snapped it shut, and folded her hands in front of her. She did not look at Kendrick. She did not look at Trina. She looked at the photographer, and the photographer looked back at her, and he gave a very small nod that nobody else in the garden caught. Every person standing in that space thought Aaliyah had just lost everything. Every person in that garden was wrong. Aaliyah had stopped losing things a long time ago. To understand what Aaliyah knew, and when she came to know it, you have to go back further than the ugly part. You have to go back to the version of the story where everything was real. They met at church, not the romanticized version, the ordinary one. Kendrick came in late and slid into the end of her pew, knocked her program off the seat beside him, and spent the next 10 minutes looking mortified. In the parking lot afterward, he apologized and made her laugh. A real laugh. She was 28 and had been careful about men long enough that she had almost stopped paying attention. Something about the way he owned the apology, directly, without decoration, registered as worth noticing. The early years were built on very little. A 2-bedroom apartment with a kitchen table that wobbled until she slid a folded matchbook under one leg. She was the kind of woman who solved small problems with whatever was at hand and kept moving. It was, she would eventually understand, both her greatest strength and the quality that certain people had spent years treating as a resource. Kendrick had the idea for the contracting business before he had anything else to build it on. No capital, no contacts, no credit history a bank would take seriously. Aaliyah organized the books, assembled the loan application, and presented it herself because Kendrick's paperwork had errors in the first 2 pages. She co-signed the note. Her name was on the line, not as formality, but as the actual financial foundation, because the bank had looked at both their histories and made a practical decision about which one they were really lending to. She worked double shifts at the hospital administrative office for 3 years to cover the payments while the business found its footing. In the 2nd year, when a cash flow crisis threatened to default the loan, she went back to the bank herself and restructured the terms. She did not tell Kendrick until it was done, because she had learned by then that some problems were better solved than worried about together. She never asked to be credited for any of it. The first anniversary photograph was taken in the apartment. In the living room, they had furnished slowly with things bought second-hand and a few pieces that were actually nice. A friend with a decent camera took it. Nothing staged. Kendrick had his arm around her shoulder and was laughing at something that happened just outside the frame. Some small household disaster she no longer remembered. Aaliyah was looking directly at the camera with the full, unhurried expression of a woman who is genuinely happy and knows it and is not performing it for anyone. She had kept that photograph from the day it was printed, folded in half, tucked into her wallet, then her purse, then her clutch. She moved it when she changed bags the way she moved her keys and her lip balm. Without thought, without ceremony, just a thing that came with her. The shift came the way real changes always come, not in a single event, in accumulation. Small adjustments to the texture of daily life that each meant nothing in isolation and meant everything together. The phone started appearing face down on surfaces, not hidden. Face down in the casual, practiced way of a man who doesn't believe he needs to hide anything because he doesn't believe he will be held accountable. A man who is hiding something anxiously will lock his phone, will move it to another room, will create distance. A man who is hiding something with confidence just turns it over. Tuesday evenings began running past 10. A Saturday job site walkthrough in a city 2 hours away that he mentioned in passing, and she filed without response. Dinners that ended late. Calls he took in the car. None of it was offered as explanation. None of it was asked for. Precious began appearing more frequently around the office. Kendrick's younger sister had always had a sideways relationship with Aaliyah. Not hostile, just distant in the specific way of a woman who has decided her brother's wife is a temporary appointment. Aaliyah had never pressed for closeness that wasn't offered, but the new frequency was different from distance. Precious and Kendrick now had conversations that ended when Aaliyah entered. Not dramatically, just a quiet subject change, a shift in register, a topic that suddenly lost its interest. The conversations happened in the hallway, in the car, in the 5 minutes before dinner when Aaliyah was still in another room. She absorbed all of it without comment. She filed it the way she filed everything, in the organized, patient interior of a woman who has learned to trust her own observations even when she cannot yet explain them. At Kendrick's mother's birthday dinner, Precious settled back in her chair after the main course and said to the general table, to no one in particular, and therefore to everyone, "Kendrick deserves to be with someone who matches where he's going." It landed in the conversation, and then the conversation moved on, because that is how casual declarations are engineered, casually enough that responding to them feels like overreaction. A few people nodded. Someone changed the subject. Aaliyah picked up her water glass and brought it to her lips and set it down. She did not say anything, but she did not forget the line, or the timing, or the way Precious had watched Kendrick's face when she said it. A restaurant receipt appeared on the kitchen counter one evening, left there the way things get left when a man has stopped bothering to manage his trail. A restaurant Aaliyah had never been to, in a neighborhood she had no reason to visit. Dated a Tuesday. Listed for 2. She looked at it. She put it in an envelope in her home office drawer and went back to making dinner. That was the first envelope. It would not be the last. And something in the back of her mind that she had been filing and filing and filing for months began, very quietly, to understand that it was time to stop filing and start building. 3 months before the photoshoot, on a Thursday night, Aaliyah was in the home office reorganizing shared business files. The children were asleep. Kendrick was out. The house had the deep quiet of after 10, when nobody else is moving in it. She had been looking for a vendor agreement from the previous year when she found something with no reason to be where it was. The company registration had been updated 6 months prior. Not a minor administrative change, a full refiling. She opened it and read it twice. Her name was gone. The co-founder line that had carried her signature and her loan guarantee for the entire life of the business had been removed. In its place, Precious. Then she opened the joint bank account. The withdrawals had been running for 2 years. Regular. First of the month, always the same amount, with the mechanical consistency of an automated transfer. She followed the destination account number through the business documentation she still had access to and found it connected to a property address. She searched the address. The lease was in Trina's name. 2 years. Every month. from the account she had built by working double shifts and restructuring loans and making decisions that never got attached to her name. That money had been going to a woman he kept in an apartment 30 minutes from their home. She sat with her hands flat on the desk. The refrigerator hummed. The neighbor's television murmured through the wall. Her face did not change. The stillness was not shock. She had passed through shock somewhere in the last 3 years of filing things without naming them. What she was feeling now was something closer to a long equation finally resolving. The answer was what she had suspected. It was worse than she had given it room to be, and now she knew exactly what to do with it. Precious had not just known, she had administered it. Co-ownership as payment for removing Aaliyah's name from the business Aaliyah had underwritten. The birthday dinner comment, the hushed conversations. All of it the surface behavior of a woman who had already made her calculation and spent her fee. After a long time in the quiet, Aaliyah picked up her phone and scrolled to a contact stored as a single letter. V. She typed 3 sentences and sent them without revision. She did not receive an answer that night. She went to bed. She slept, which surprised her, but it should not have. She had always slept well once she knew what she was dealing with. In the morning, there was a response from V. 2 words, "I'm ready." The next day, Aaliyah drove downtown to a law office on the 14th floor of a building with clean marble floors and the kind of elevator that moved without sound. Vanessa was already waiting in a conference room with coffee she had made herself because the office assistant hadn't arrived yet. They had known each other for 11 years. Vanessa was the kind of attorney and the kind of friend who looked at a situation and told you exactly what it was, without gentling the edges, because she respected you enough to assume you could handle the truth. They met 3 times in the weeks that followed. Vanessa reviewed the original co-signer documents. She reviewed the business registration history. She reviewed the transaction records and the timeline of financial contributions Aaliyah had made from her own income over the company's first 3 years. On the 3rd meeting, Vanessa set her pen down on the conference room table and said, "This case is straightforward. You built this company. The paper trail doesn't lie." Then she said, "What do you want to do?" Aaliyah told her. When she left the law office that first day, she came out into the low afternoon light carrying a manila folder. She stopped at her car, set the folder on the passenger seat, and then reached into her clutch and removed the folded anniversary photograph. She placed it on top of the folder. She looked at both for a moment. The worn photograph, the clean legal folder, sitting there together on the seat beside her. She started the engine and drove home. The preparation happened in the margins of an ordinary life, which was the point. Aaliyah went to work. She made dinner. She attended school events and returned phone calls and behaved, from the outside, like a woman managing the quiet indignity of a husband who had stopped pretending. From the inside, she was building the architecture of an outcome she had already decided. She organized everything into a single manila folder. The original loan documents bearing her signature, the business registration history showing her as co-founder for 9 years, the bank statements annotated to mark which deposits came from her income, the updated registration with Precious's name, and 12 months of transfers to Trina's address. She left copies with Vanessa and kept 1 set at home. Kendrick, in those same weeks, became careless in the specific way of a man who believes he has won. He brought Trina to business dinners. He let Precious operate visibly from his office, signing correspondence, sitting on client calls. He left his phone on the kitchen counter unlocked. He had reduced Aaliyah in his private accounting to a problem already solved. A mutual friend delivered the Trina comment with the careful wince of someone who couldn't let a message go undelivered. Some women build things for other women to enjoy. Aaliyah thanked her, found a notepad, wrote the line down exactly as spoken, and added it to the folder. The photoshoot invitations went out 6 weeks before the event. Aaliyah sent them personally, booked the estate, hired the photographer, arranged the catering. She sent one additional invitation to an office address with a specific arrival time, no name on the envelope. The recipient knew who it was for. Kendrick had suggested the photoshoot in passing weeks earlier. Aaliyah had agreed, then gone home and made it real. He had shown up 40 minutes late and walked onto property his wife had designed from the foundation and felt entirely at home. The irony sat in her chest, not as bitterness, but as clarity. She had been making things real for a long time. This would be the last one. The gathering was well into its middle hour when the energy of the afternoon shifted in a way that most guests felt without being able to name. The early awkwardness of people finding their footing had dissolved. The children had stopped performing and were genuinely playing now. The older relatives had found comfortable seats, and the conversation near the tables had loosened into the real register, the personal memories, the shared histories, the things people only say when they've relaxed past the pretending. Aaliyah moved through all of it with the particular ease that had made at least 3 guests independently find reasons to watch her for a second longer than the occasion required. Not suspicious ease. The ease of someone who knows exactly where she is and why, and for whom the afternoon holds no uncertainty. She spoke to the photographer twice more in quiet asides that nobody overheard. She adjusted one aspect of the seating arrangement near the garden wall with a small, practical redirect that appeared entirely casual. Every decision she made looked like good hosting. None of it was only good hosting. Kendrick's eyes found her across the lawn more than once. Not intentionally. He would not have characterized it as watching her, but his attention returned to her the way attention returns to something the body has registered as significant before the conscious mind has caught up. She was too calm. He could not have explained exactly why that bothered him. He had expected, at some level, not consciously, because he had not permitted himself the self-awareness that would have required. He had expected some version of reaction, tears, or withdrawal, or the stiff dignity of a woman making herself invisible. Aaliyah was not invisible. She was simply present in a way that had no performance in it, and the absence of performance made her, somehow, the most notable person on the lawn. Precious had arrived midway through the gathering and moved immediately toward the logistics of the event with the proprietary energy of a woman who believed she belonged near the organizing center of things. She asked about the catering arrangement. She suggested a different location for the portraits. She positioned herself near the photographer with the air of someone co-hosting. Aaliyah redirected her both times, warmly, briefly, completely. The first time with a gentle reference to an arrangement already confirmed. The second time with a small specific task that took Precious to the other side of the lawn. Both redirects were executed with such natural ease that an observer would have thought nothing of them. Precious understood both completely. Her eyes sharpened, and she moved where she was sent, and she said nothing because there was nothing to say. Raymond, who had known Kendrick since the company's first difficult year, who had referred the third and fourth clients, who had watched the business grow from a 2-truck operation to something real, pulled Kendrick aside near the garden gate and said quietly, "Your wife organized all of this?" Kendrick gave a vague, distracted nod. He was already looking across the lawn at something else. Raymond watched Aaliyah for a moment. His expression was the expression of a man doing a recalculation, and what it was yielding was not what he had previously assumed. He didn't say anything else. He returned to his seat with a glass of lemonade and sat down and continued watching. Then the photographer moved to the center of the lawn and called out that it was time for the family portrait, and the gathering reorganized itself with the familiar mild chaos of 60 people trying to form an orderly group. Grandparents to the front, seated, the older generation standing, parents and children fanning out toward the back and sides. Kendrick moved toward the center with the ease of a man who has not questioned his position in years. Aaliyah stepped in beside him. 12 years of muscle memory, the natural place of a wife beside her husband in a family photograph. Kendrick turned. He placed his palm flat against her shoulder. He pushed her sideways. And then everything that followed happened exactly the way it was built to happen. The photographer lowered his camera. He looked at the screen on the back of the camera for a moment. Then he looked up at the assembled guests with a calm that was slightly wrong for a hired photographer, too settled, too unhurried, the look of a man who knows his role in a larger sequence of events and is performing it exactly as briefed. He said, clearly and without particular emotion, "Before we wrap, I was asked to share something with everyone present." He walked to a small folding table near the garden wall, where a display screen had been set up before the first guest arrived. It had been there all afternoon. People had walked past it 6 times. Nobody had thought to ask what it was for, because it looked like the kind of equipment that belongs at catered events. The photographer connected his laptop to the HDMI cable that was already plugged in, already waiting, and brought the screen to life. The first document appeared. Clean, formal, the kind of official document that carries its own gravity just by existing. Kendrick's contracting business, original registration. 2 names at the top of the founding section, Kendrick's name, and Aaliyah's. As co-founder and primary loan guarantor, her signature at the bottom in the unmistakable hand of someone who had signed it without hesitation because she believed in what she was building. The date in the header was from the year they had the wobbly kitchen table and the one window that stuck in the rain. Nobody spoke. The second document appeared. Same business, new registration. The date stamp at the top placed it 6 months ago. Aaliyah's name was gone from the co-founder line. In its place, Precious. The guests near the front leaned in slightly to read, the way people lean into things they are not sure they have seen correctly. They leaned back again with the particular stillness of people who have confirmed what they hoped they had misread. Precious, standing toward the back of the gathered family, made a sound. Not a word. Something that started to be a word and didn't arrive. The third image was a bank statement. 12 months of transactions. The same amount leaving the same account on the first of every month, with the mechanical regularity of an automated transfer that nobody set up by accident. The destination account. The property address linked to it. The screen held on it for long enough that the people in the front rows could see every number clearly, and several of them did. And the silence that followed was the silence of understanding, rather than confusion. Kendrick opened his mouth. Aaliyah reached into her clutch. She removed the folded anniversary photograph. She had carried it for 12 years. It was soft at the edges from the years, the crease down the center worn so thoroughly that it fell open with the lightest pressure, but she held it closed for a moment with both hands. Then she placed it face up on the table beside her, the image of the 2 of them from the year the business had no money, and the kitchen table wobbled, and she was looking at the camera with the face of a woman who was genuinely happy and knew it. She set it there in the full view of the garden, in the afternoon light, where everyone could see what it was. Then she set the manila folder beside it. She looked at Kendrick. She said, "Everything in that folder is already filed. The business, the accounts, all of it." Her voice carried without being raised. It was the voice of a woman who has nothing left to perform and nothing left to protect, and is therefore entirely free, and the freedom in it was more devastating than anger would have been. From the back of the garden, near the small table at the far edge of the lawn that had been present all afternoon and ignored all afternoon, a woman raised her hand, not dramatically, not high, just a brief lift from the table surface, an acknowledgement, a confirmation. Vanessa sat with her leather portfolio in front of her, dressed simply, the way a person dresses when they are attending something as a professional rather than a guest. She had been seated there for 20 minutes. Not one person had thought to introduce themselves. The contact Aaliyah had texted during the hook moment, the identity that had sat as an open question since that first charged exchange in the garden. V. Vanessa. Present, calm, and completely prepared. The room took a moment to process this. Then it processed Kendrick's face. He was looking at the manila folder with the expression of a man who has just fully understood the dimensions of a space he has been standing inside for months without seeing the walls. The confidence was gone. Not faded. Gone. The way a light goes when the switch is thrown rather than slowly dimmed. He looked in this moment smaller than Aaliyah had ever seen him look in 12 years. Trina had taken one small step sideways. Not a dramatic step, not a scene. The quiet, sideways movement of a woman who has been performing an arrival and is now performing a recalculation. Her hand, which had been resting on Kendrick's arm for most of the afternoon, was no longer resting anywhere. The smirk she had offered Aaliyah across the lawn when she first arrived, the held eye contact, the lifted chin, was gone entirely. Her face had gone to the careful blankness of a woman buying herself time. She looked at Kendrick. Kendrick was not looking at her. In the front row, one of the older aunts turned her body toward Precious, with the full deliberateness of a woman who has decided she is done being indirect. Her voice was clear and carrying and unmistakably intentional. "You said Kendrick deserved someone who matched where he was going. You said that at his mother's birthday dinner." She paused. Every person in the garden had gone completely still. "Did you know then? Or did you arrange it?" Precious opened her mouth. Nothing came. Raymond stood up. He did not make a speech. He did not address Kendrick. He gathered his jacket from the back of his chair with the quiet, final energy of a man who has made a decision he will not revisit. He looked at Kendrick for a moment. Not with anger, with something closer to grief. The look of a man watching a version of someone he thought he knew dissolve into someone he doesn't recognize. Then he walked toward the garden gate. The gravel crunched under his shoes. Two other business contacts rose from their chairs within the same minute and followed him out without a word. Aaliyah picked up the anniversary photograph. She folded it once along the worn crease that she knew by feel, the fold she had made and remade hundreds of times without thinking, the fold that was now hers alone to decide the purpose of. She placed it back in her clutch. She snapped it shut. She looked at her children. They were standing near the garden path in their pressed clothes, with the wide, uncertain eyes of children who have understood that the adults around them are navigating something serious, even if the specific shape of it is beyond them. Aaliyah held her hand out. The younger one came first, quick and instinctive. The older one followed more slowly, watching her face, reading it. She put her hand on the back of the younger one's head for one moment. Just one moment, the warm weight of a mother's palm, and then turned and walked with them toward the garden gate. She did not raise her voice once during any of it. She did not look at Kendrick once after she placed the photograph on the table. The garden watched her leave in complete silence. What followed was not dramatic. It was something quieter, and because of that, more complete. Vanessa filed the legal claims in the week after the estate. The documentation Aaliyah had assembled over those months of careful, methodical preparation was exactly what Vanessa had said it was: straightforward. Aaliyah's original co-signer status was documented in every loan record. Her income contributions in the company's first 3 years were traceable through the joint account statements she had annotated. The removal of her name from the business registration, done without her knowledge and without a legal dissolution of the original partnership agreement, did not hold. The case settled out of court 4 months later. Aaliyah received a significant share of the company's assessed value, which was considerably more than Kendrick had apparently calculated she would be entitled to, because he had never sat down and done the arithmetic of how much of the company she had actually built. The business contacts disappeared gradually, not loudly. Raymond's number went to voicemail and the calls were not returned. The major contract that had been in late negotiation, the one that Kendrick had been treating as secured, quietly fell apart. No confrontation, no explanation, just a silence where a yes should have arrived. 2 other clients moved to other contractors over the following months. The reputation that Kendrick had spent a decade building was not destroyed in a single event. It deteriorated steadily from the inside, the way reputations do when the people who had trusted them decide one by one to trust someone else. Precious lost her co-ownership position as part of the settlement terms. She attended one family gathering in the months that followed, appearing near the edge of the room with the careful positioning of someone who no longer knows they're standing. The extended family did not exclude her with anything said. They excluded her with the economy of attention, the conversations that moved elsewhere, the seats that were already taken, the stories that started before she arrived and didn't pick up when she sat down. Kendrick's mother stopped asking her to help with anything. No one said why. No one needed to. Trina was gone before the settlement was finalized. She did not make a public statement. She did not appear at any event. The apartment lease did not renew. The automatic transfers had been frozen by the legal hold from the moment Vanessa filed. And whatever arithmetic Trina had been doing about the future, she had apparently done it and arrived at a different answer than the one she had been planning around. She receded the way people recede when the version of a situation they signed up for turns out not to exist. Kendrick came to the door one evening in the 3rd month. Aaliyah opened it. He looked diminished in the specific way of a man who has been carrying the full weight of his own decisions for long enough that the posture it produces is indistinguishable from exhaustion. He started to speak. She gave him enough time to say 3 words. Then she said, without anger, without the performance of strength because she no longer needed to perform it, "The lawyers handle everything now, Kendrick. That's what they're for." She closed the door, not slammed. Closed, with the quiet finality of something that is simply finished. He stood on the porch for a moment in the dark. Then he walked back to his car. He had spent years arranging things so that she felt small, and in the end, the only person who made him feel smaller was himself. 8 months later, on a Saturday morning in the last weeks of autumn, Aaliyah was on the front porch of her own house. Not the house they had shared. Her house, A smaller place, with a yard that caught the morning light and a front porch with 2 chairs and enough quiet to actually use them. 3 blocks from the school the children liked, in a neighborhood that felt like the kind of place a person chooses rather than arrives at by default. She had signed for it herself. She had moved them in on a Tuesday with 2 borrowed trucks and the help of people she had chosen. The kitchen table didn't wobble. She had a coffee mug in both hands and the particular stillness of a Saturday morning that has nothing scheduled until noon. The children were in the front yard, the younger one running in tight, purposeless circles for reasons nobody had thought to question, the older one standing with arms crossed, trying to explain the rules of a game that the running appeared to have no relation to. Their voices were the kind of noise that fills an outdoor space without crowding it. She could hear them without listening for them, which was exactly the right amount. On the porch table beside her was a framed photograph, the anniversary photograph, the one from the early apartment, the one where Kendrick was laughing at something outside the frame, and Aaliyah was looking directly at the camera with the unhurried expression of someone who was genuinely happy and knew it. It was no longer folded, no longer tucked in a clutch and carried in secret, pressed against her side through every hard occasion like a talisman. It was framed, under glass, sitting in the morning light where she could see it without reaching for it. The photograph was hers. The memory in it was hers. The woman in it had always been hers, and she had simply gotten back to her. A car pulled up to the curb, and her friend got out laughing before the door was fully open, already mid-story, about a parking situation that had apparently unfolded with the quality of a minor theatrical event. Aaliyah laughed too. Not the laugh of someone who is trying to feel something. The easy, actual laugh of a woman who is exactly where she decided to be, among people she chose, on a morning that belongs entirely to her. She set her coffee mug on the porch rail and stood up to meet her. Some women fall apart in public so the world can see their pain. Aaliyah chose something harder. She held herself together in public so she could rebuild in private. And what she built, in the quiet of her own choosing, on her own time, with her own hands, nobody would ever take from her again. If this story stayed with you, it was meant to. Share it with someone who needs to remember what quiet strength looks like.